Thank you for joining us today. We get a lot of questions from the general public as well as our YouTube channel here as to how we manage our very large family. First of all, do you want to talk about who we are?
So we're just a different life. We're a large adoptive family with multiple children with special needs, and we're vlogging about the different aspects of our life and how we manage on a daily basis.
Yeah, and we're hoping with the educational component of this, that'll actually generate questions from people out there in YouTube land to get back to us. How do we do things and such? And this is why we're doing the questions and answers. So let's get into it. We're going to talk today about going out in public with children with special needs. So do you want to elaborate on that a little bit?
So let's start with where we came from. So we had 5 biological children, and then we started adopting. And the first group that we adopted, they had fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, and they had some post-traumatic stress. And when we would go out in public, which was actually when we would go out our front door, if there was a loud noise, they would be terrified. They would be scared. They wouldn't know what to do. If a siren went by from an ambulance or a police car or fire truck, they would actually run towards it
because they would go in total panic mode. The whole flight or fight.
They would flight, and so we started with them working on how to cope in public, and we had to work on skills. And then we've adopted more over the years, so we have a variety of special needs. So a lot of people think that it's just the children with autism or sensory processing disorder that have trouble when they go out. But actually, it's a variety of special needs that children have challenges. And a lot of the skills are the things that you need to do to help the child be successful are very similar. And I think they would work with pretty much any special needs.
Yeah, so like Deb says, when loud noises, so it doesn't matter if it's a siren, even a big truck going by, a big dump truck or something like that, anything that was loud was really setting the children off. And we would literally take baby steps with them. And that sometimes meant only walking all of about 30 feet from the house to the end of the driveway. And standing there and practicing.
And our children with autism and our children with sensory processing, we had one that every time we went out in public, he would curl up in the fetal position and start crying. He was just terrified whenever he went out. And other ones, if you would drive a different route, or if it was too bright out or the sun was just at the certain angle, there was so many things that caused challenges that made it really hard. There was times where we had our sibling group of 4, and they were quite young, and they all had a lot of challenges, and we would go out, and one would start crying, and they would all start crying, and then you're standing there as the parent with 4 children that are in complete meltdown, and everybody wherever you are is staring at you because obviously you must have done something wrong. You've got 4 children screaming.
And sometimes it was just because of their sensory issues that caused them to do that. One child would start crying or screaming, which would then hurt the other children's ears. They would find that it would be a sensory overload for them. So they would start crying, and then it was a chain reaction. It would just start snowballing from there.
And then soon we wanted to cry.
Yeah, soon we wanted to cry. But anyway, so we're going to talk about the steps to get them where we want them to be able to go out in public and be successful for it. So a lot of what we do is prevention. Do you want to talk about prevention?
Well, first I want to talk about, it's our view that children have challenging behaviors and meltdowns to get something, being either attention or access to something, or they're trying to get out of something like the crowd, the light, the stimulation, or the demand. So the meltdown can be from social anxiety or fear of the unknown, sensory overload, which is all generally causing the child pain or fear.
Yeah, they feel pain differently from what your average person would feel pain. It's not the same, that's for sure. Steps to get them where we'd like them to be. That's where the focus is, the goal is for the children. You want to talk about that?
So a lot of what we do is prevention. So we, first of all, tend to the basics. Don't ever take a tired or hungry child anywhere unless it's an absolute essential thing for you to take them there.
Yeah, like a doctor's appointment or a dentist's appointment. Some of these specialists can take 1 to 2 years to be able to get in to see. So it's obviously not going to be an option to be able to take them there. And Deb mentioned, if they're hungry, and that includes going to a restaurant as well. The last thing you want to do, and I know it sounds kind of funny, the last thing you want to do really is take a hungry child to a restaurant, because they're going to be expected to sit and wait. Even having to line up in a fast food restaurant, for instance, can be very difficult for a child. So getting them to do that and expecting them to wait, I mean, there's something that we work up to, but it's not an expectation right off the get-go. These are things that we have to practice to get up to that point. So what else?
Before we walk into a place, we need to have them be able to sit quietly. So before you walk into a place where you're expecting your child to sit quietly, maybe they need to burn off some energy. As long as burning off some energy doesn't arouse them.
Yeah, they don't want to be hyper. We don't want to exasperate the problem, complicate the problem. We want to solve a problem here.
So if running around will help them to sit calm, then give them a little bit of a break to run around, play, and then come in and sit quietly. But if your child's a child that running around just excites them that much more, and they're not going to come in and sit down, then don't do that. You really need to read your child on that instance.
Absolutely. And another important thing is, don't be in a rush to go somewhere. Never take a child into a place where you absolutely have to go in to get something, because the child will feed off of that. They will often feed off of the stress that you have of having to accomplish a specific task.
So, for instance, Sean used to be late all the time.
Not anymore.
And he would arrive at a place 2 minutes before, and then he had to change diapers, and he had to get everyone out of the vehicle. And then he's like, come on, we got to get going. And that just fed into the children's stress, and it caused more problems when he got inside.
Yeah, and it could be even something as simple, well, I need X, Y, and Z from this particular store. So let's go, we got to go in and we got to get this stuff, and children will then start to get worked up over that. So you have to be prepared to really abandon what it is that you're trying to accomplish yourself if you need to, because there's no sense in taking a child in and have them fail. We're trying to do everything that we can here to build success into the children. So by taking small steps, meeting the child where they are, that really helps considerably.
So that is one of the things that we do, is we meet the child where they are. So if your child can only handle 1 minute in a store, then practice doing 1 minute and 2 seconds and build up.
That's right. And not necessarily to even go into that particular store to buy anything. It could be just simply, we are going to practice going into the store. Maybe we're going to walk to aisle 5, for instance, and we're going to turn around, look at a thing, turn around, and we'll walk right back out again. And once the child is successful at doing that, then we can slowly build on that success.
And we also will use reinforcers or bribes, if you want to call them that, to help them to be more successful. So you're rewarding them for their good behavior. You're rewarding them for doing this task, because this is hard work for them. So use some reinforcers, help them be successful.
Exactly. And never be afraid to say to a child, I'm sorry, but you're not settled enough, or whatever language you want to use at that particular time, but you are not going to be successful. So I'm afraid you're going to have to stay in the car with mom or dad while the other one maybe takes some of the other children in, and they're going to have a meltdown. They're going to be upset. But the bottom line is there's no sense in taking them in there if you know that they're not going to be able to handle it, because that's going to create stress for everybody else, and that will affect the success of the other children that you have.
And staying in the vehicle with mom or dad doesn't have to be a punishment. Mom or dad could read a story. They could play a little game. It doesn't have to.
I Spy, one of my favorite ones.
It doesn't have to be a punishment. It's an alternative. We're going to have so much fun. We're going to stay in the car and we're going to play a game.
So one of the things that we do right from the very beginning is establishing some very basic rules. Now, I know what you're probably thinking right now. Oh, rules, rules, rules. But let me stop you there for just a moment. What a basic rule can look like is teaching a child the game go, go, stop. We want to be able to know that when we say stop to the child, that they are actually going to do what they're told to do and not run off. So we will practice this in the home, we'll practice this in a park or other public spaces, inside or outside, and go, go, stop. And that's what we expect from them. Once we have that basic rule down that we can say stop and we're comfortable that they're actually going to do what they're told, that will also help to alleviate the stress on the child, because they'll start to learn. At one point they think it's a game, but they also start to learn that maybe mom and dad are saying this for another reason altogether.
So the other rules we have are to respect yourself, to respect others, and to respect the property around you. So we're not going to take a child into a store and they're going to clear the shelves because they feel like throwing everything. We're not going to have them being rude to people. We are working on the skills of respecting themselves, respecting others, and respecting the property. So those are our very basic core rules that we start with. And if you think about it, those are pretty much rules that most people live by.
Yeah, it would be considered what would be the normal rules that people would live by in society:
And
respect for self and others.
you might not count them as rules, but I'm sure that most people are following those.
Yeah, there's another thing too, that when we run into a difficult situation, sometimes asking the child, rather than telling them or expecting them to do something, ask them, do you think you're going to be able to go in? And quite often, a child, if they say no, they don't think they can, then respect that. And once again, it may mean that you have to put something off. You've traveled maybe a little bit of a distance to get to that particular store. But if you don't have someone there to support you to stay back with the child in the vehicle, maybe that's not a good time to actually make that attempt to do that. We're going to keep the mandatory, the ones that they don't have a choice, down to a very bare minimum, like doctors and dentists. Fortunately, the community that we live in, we have a dentist that's very, very understanding. And if the child just walks in and looks at the chair and that's as much as they can do, the dentist is very happy to have them walk in and do that. So it's not a big deal. But however, with some other specialists, and like I said earlier, it can take 1 or 2 years to get into these specialists. And if you turn around and walk away, it may be another year or two before you can get back in again. So some things there is no negotiating on. For everything else, there are different levels of negotiation.
So the child's abilities is very dependent on their age and their level of function. So, for instance, we had a 2-year-old who would curl up in the fetal position. No matter how much we talked to him, that wasn't going to help him. So we had to start with very basics, like making him comfortable where we went. And for some of our children, we had to resort to medication to help them. So the doctors, after we discussed what our challenges were, they prescribed medication to help the children because they had such severe anxieties. So you really need to look at each child individually to see what is going to work best for them.
Absolutely. And like we said earlier, there's all sorts of different things can set children off. Deb mentioned if the sun's low and flickering through the trees, you get a strobe light effect. Coming through the trees, and that can set a child off because of the sensory input into them can be very, very difficult. It may be something very simple, like we're taking a different route today to get to store ABC, for instance, because maybe it's blocked, maybe we have somewhere else we need to go past, and children get very, very programmed a lot of times, and they sometimes will like a very specific route to get from one point to another point. They don't want to deviate from that. That's what their expectations are in their mind. So sometimes creating that detailed plan with your child on expectations, what you're going to be doing and everything else, is really important before entering public places, and even backing it up before that, before we even start driving, making that detailed plan. Do you want to expand on that a little bit?
So maybe for your plan, depending on the child's level, it's pictures, and you've got pictures we are going to, and maybe it's a first then. So first we're going to store ABC, and then we're going to the playground. So the first thing might be a challenge for them, but the second thing is something rewarding to them. so that you're making it in little steps for them. And it might have to be pictures, or if they have the cognition that they can understand the spoken word, then that's good. But you really need to meet your child where your child's at.
And we have to have success not only for the child, but also for us as well. It's got to be successful for all parties involved. It can't just be on one side. So like Debbie said here, going to a store, going to a park afterwards, that may be a bit of a reward, maybe even like a bit of a bribe at times. But the bottom line is, if it's successful for the child and successful for us, that's kind of what we have to do.
And then everybody comes home happy for the day.
Yes, absolutely. Making sure the child has the ability to follow rules. That's another important one, because some children don't have that ability built into them because their cognitive functions are so low. Do you want to expand?
And that's the part that I'm saying, meet the child where they are. So if your child can't follow the direction when you say, okay, we're going to A, B, and C, and they're still stuck on A, then you're not meeting them where they're at. So if meeting them where they are at means you're just walking out the front door to the end of the driveway, then that's where you're starting, and you're going to build from there. So our child that was scared of loud noises, and every time that she went outside, she had the fight or flight, we met her where she was at, and that meant we were working from the front door to the driveway. And then we would progress. So then after we mastered that, maybe we walked the front door to a couple doors down the street. And we had to really break it down to really small steps to make her be able to be successful at what she was doing.
Yeah, we had to have very, very good situational awareness, because we didn't know what was going to trigger this particular child to set them off running in any particular direction. So we had to be prepared for a dog barking at a neighbor's house towards us, a truck coming around the corner, a siren, anything, even blasting off in the distance. Someone doing some road building work somewhere, a bit of a rumble would set them off. So we had to be very, very situationally aware to make sure that we were prepared to, hold on to that child very quickly. Without hurting them, of course, but hold on to them quickly so that they don't cause self-harm.
And we did a lot of talking. So if we heard a vehicle in the distance, we'd say, oh, do you hear that vehicle? I think that vehicle's coming this way. And we would stand back and we would talk it through, but make sure that she was in a safe place, and we would talk it through. So in very simple language, so that it became a pattern, and then eventually she was able to talk it through. I hear it's coming this way, and then it helped alleviate some of the stress and anxiety so that she wasn't so fearful and feeling the need to flight.
Yeah, and a lot of times too, things that would help, we would get our child to wave. There's the dog. Yes, the dog's barking, but you can wave at the dog. Hi, doggy. We're waving to you. We're saying hi to trucks that would drive by, even an emergency vehicle. Lights and siren going. We would get them to stop and wave to the vehicle, and this helped to calm their fears down.
And by stopping and backing into a safe location, so if we were on the side of the road, backing onto the shoulder of the road, so we would stop, and then that actually gave us more clues if she was going to run away, because we were standing still and our focus was on listening and processing what's coming at us.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit more about building in something enjoyable for your child, building into the plan something enjoyable, like whether it be coloring, whether it be fidget toys. Let's talk about that for a moment.
So most adults work on a reward system. You go to work, you get rewarded with your paycheck.
Yes, that's the best part.
And children are no different, but they need smaller rewards more frequently because they can't handle waiting 2 weeks or a month or whatever the distance is till you get your paycheck. So by giving them small rewards, then you're recognizing the hard work that they're putting in. So you need to find a reward that is something of value to your child. So that might be a small candy, it might be a Cheerio, it might be playing with a favored toy, it might be going to a playground, it might just be you saying, wow, great job, you did it really well. You need to come up with some things that are rewarding to your child. And that's going to be different for each child because depending on their ages and their abilities, depending on their likes, but you need to find something that's motivating for your child.
Yeah, one of the things when I am out talking at conferences on fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, from a parent's point of view, I really stress that if you've met a child with fetal alcohol spectrum disorder, you've met a child. Because every child, it does not matter whether they have autism, it does not matter whether they have fetal alcohol or any other type of cognitive or physical impairments out there. Every person is unique and they have to be treated as such. What works for us here may be able to be applied in your situation or children that you're around, but it might not necessarily work. But I think the general principles are absolutely there.
And so you're really becoming a detective for your child. So you need to determine what sets them off, what makes them happy, and you need to work together to start where they're at and build up steps to where you would like them to be.
Absolutely. When behavior deteriorates, we tend to redirect our children or child in that particular moment. We try to look for the warning signs ahead of time because each child, being unique, has their own set of warning signs. Once we start seeing those warning signs, we will attempt to redirect them to something else. And what else do we do? Remind them of?
So we remind them of the expectations if they have the cognitive ability to understand that, and we redirect. And depending on where we are, we might have to do a lot of redirecting and really trying to pull out all the stops to help their behavior. Or if we have the ability to leave that location, then it might mean that we have to leave that location. So we were actually at a movie, all of the children and myself, and one of the children started screaming and having a complete raging meltdown, and we actually had to leave. We had to pick up that child, and the other children had to come as well because I did not have another adult with me. The next time I made sure that there was another adult because if the child was going to behave like that again, the others weren't going to have to miss out because of this child.
That's right.
So you always want to have a plan on how you're going to handle it because you're going to have to escape sometimes.
Yeah, absolutely. So, how do we practice aiming for behaviors that we expect in the home, similar to the ones that we expect for outings?
So, for instance, if we're expecting the same behaviors when we're at home as when we're out. So, eating at the table, we expect them to sit at the table and eat a meal with the family, and that's practicing. So when you're at a restaurant, that they'll sit at the table at a restaurant and eat with the family. So by building those skills at home, they are able to better transfer them to outings.
Absolutely. Practice transitions. How do we practice? That's transitioning from one activity to another activity, and it could be something simple as in a waiting room into a doctor's office. So let's talk about that a little bit.
So transitions can be really difficult, and you might need some visuals. We're going to first do this and then we're going to do that. You might need some timers to count down. You might need a lot of resources to help with transitions. We have one child that has a particular challenge. We go into a doctor's office, and then when the doctor calls the child into the actual appointment, the child's having trouble with that transition. So for us, we had to, because we have so many children seeing the doctor, this helps for us. We will have 2 children have an appointment at the same time, and we'll have the one child that's able to transition fine go in first, and then we'll have another person waiting with the child that struggles with the transitions, and we'll have arranged this with the doctor that whatever child will come in when they're ready, that they're struggling with the transition, and then we're building on the success. So next time the child came in and they weren't forced and they didn't have a meltdown. So next time they're more eager to come in because they didn't have that negative consequence when they were having their appointment. So by building on successes, the children are more successful that way.
Yeah, and this is something that's practiced not only with Debbie and myself for the children here, but these are expectations that we work with the special educational assistants that work in our home, the behavioral interventionists, and sometimes the interventionists will actually work with them just transitioning from one activity to another. They will walk them through, they'll practice it so that the children are more successful, because once again, we try to build in success. So this is something right across the whole spectrum of our operations here, so to speak, in our family.
So the children, on a daily basis for their schooling, for example, they have a schedule and it has the different topics, and they might have visuals. Some of them are able to follow the schedule, but they are practicing those transitions each time it's time for a different subject or a different activity. So they're practicing those things, but some of those practices have to be more realistic, more real life, like the doctor's appointment. It's not something you can really practice in the home. You can practice transitions, but the actual doctor's appointment, sometimes you can't practice that, and you have to work on that when you're actually in the situation.
Absolutely. And sometimes we can see our children starting to develop some anxiety or behaviors that we don't necessarily want to see. So one of the things that's really important is teaching your child to self-advocate. So that means using their voice or using some other sort of clue, whether it be simple sign language or things that you've developed with your child, to help them self-advocate for themselves. So if they know that something's bothering them, they need to speak up and actually say something so that we can prevent the anxieties from building up in them. So that's really huge for us here.
So the younger children, obviously they're not able to do that, or the ones that are without words, they might not be at a level where they can self-advocate. But you as the parent or you as the adult in their life, you could be using those words when you're leaving a situation. Oh, it's really busy in here, or it's really loud in here. We're going to step somewhere quieter. Oh, you seem upset by this. So that the children are learning those words, and maybe you've taught them the sign for all done, or maybe you've given them some way of telling you, because when they show their behavior, because it's so overwhelming, they are showing you, no matter if they have words or not, they are communicating that to you. So you want to back it up a little bit before they have that meltdown, so that they're able to communicate it to you before it becomes too overwhelming.
Absolutely. And when we notice things going on and helping with actually absolutely everything that we're trying to do here, we try to take a multisensory approach. So the child just doesn't get something through their ears, so to speak. They can get something through their eyes and maybe through touch as well. You know, simply saying to a child, stop, may not fully register with them, but by putting your hand up and saying, stop, don't go any further, they're now getting a multisensory approach to what it is that you're trying to get to them or get from them for expectations for behavior.
Or maybe when you go to talk to them, you put your hand on their shoulder so that they will look at you, so that they have that connection and they're actually looking at you, so that they know that you're talking.
Yeah, more of a grounding type strategy to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Next thing I want to talk about, this is huge. This is really big. Never, ever let your child back you into a corner with no escape, because children will attempt to do that. So what we talk about is have an exit strategy. Make sure that anything you go to do with your child, you have a way out, a clear pathway to get out of that particular situation. Because if you don't, a child can use that to their advantage, almost like a blackmail. I'm going to scream until I get what I want. Well, I don't know what to do. I really need to get in here and get this. And the child, oh, I better give the child what they want here. That's not acceptable. You need to have an exit strategy for everything. And that may mean simply just driving down the road and turning around, going home. It may mean pulling over for a couple of minutes for the child to stop screaming. Who knows what it is? You have to develop that for your own individual situation here. We're not going to tell you exactly what to do. You know, these are things that are general ideas to give you.
And we've been backed into that corner. Our children have thought that if they want something and they scream loud enough that we're going to back down. Look at, there's all these people watching. I'm going to really get what I want. And as uncomfortable as it can be for the adult, you're going to have to do something. Otherwise, it's going to become a pattern.
Absolutely. After all, you as the adult are in charge. Your child is not. And if you allow them, or you set yourself up to be painted into a corner or backed into a corner with no escape plan whatsoever, then now the child feels they're in charge. And a lot of children are looking for that type of control. That they're maybe very stubborn in some ways, but they're looking for that control over their lives, maybe one little area of their life that they feel that they can get control in, that may not have control in other things. Especially with children with special needs, there's a lot of things in their lives they have no control over, unfortunately.
So a lot of times they're grasping to control something, and this might be the thing that they think that they can control.
Absolutely. Practicing. We talked about this already. Practice, practice, practice when you absolutely do not need something. You don't need that particular item from the grocery store, but you're going to practice. If you're successful in getting it and getting out, that is great. But never, ever go in with the idea that you are going to successfully complete your mission, so to speak.
Especially in the beginning. As you progress, you would like to hope that you're going to be able to successfully get things. But in the beginning, spend some time practicing so that when you want to do other things, that the child's already built up those skills.
Absolutely. So yeah, practice when you don't need something. That's a huge one as well.
And when you're practicing, use some reinforcers, like have some bribes. Like we already talked about, have some things to help encourage them to do just a little bit more than they did last time.
Absolutely. And we're always striving to expand the horizons of our children, and that means their behaviors as well. Using timers or some way to time. So when we say to a child, we're only going to go into this store for 10 minutes, then do not be wandering, like I tend to do, up and down aisles looking at things. You've said to your child, we're going to do this for 10 minutes. And once again, initially, this is what you're going to start off with, and stick to it. Make sure that the child can see, and hopefully they can have a way of visualizing the time, so to speak, whether it be with countdown timers or things like that. Set it for 10 minutes and stick to your word.
And if it's not a countdown timer, maybe it's we're going in and we're grabbing 5 things. So we have like 5 tokens. Okay, we've got number 1, we've got number 2. Some way of them having the control that they're trying to get in other ways with their behavior. So you're giving them a way of having some control without having the negative control that you don't want to have.
Absolutely. At the end of it all, we've talked about debriefing with our children. We should probably consider debriefing with ourselves. And now that may mean Debbie and I talking to each other, or just simply Debbie having a talk with herself and saying, well, that went really well, or wait a minute, it didn't go so well. Let's take a look what has set them off. What was the trigger point for the child that caused the behavior that made it not so successful that particular time?
And this is the detective work that we were talking about. You're becoming a detective of your child. So you know that this set them off today, and maybe it's because A, B, and C already set them off, but you're learning what's working for your child so that they can be more successful. And then eventually, as your child gets older and you're talking to them, I noticed this bothered you when we did whatever it was, then they are able to take over that detective work for themselves as they get older and more mature.
Absolutely. So this gives our basic rundown of going out in public with our children with special needs, and what we have found to be successful. Once again, like Debbie says, you're a detective for your own child, and when you have multiple children with maybe multiple special needs, you're really going to have to do a lot of digging. You're going to be a professional detective by the time those children are growing up. And don't think for 1 minute this does not carry on into adulthood. It does. Some of our adult children, we have seen these things, and we've had to help them through a number of different things. And sometimes it meant backing things right up to some of the early days with them to help them get through those particular areas. But is there anything else you want to add?
I want to thank everybody for joining us
today.
today.
Thank you so much for coming.
And Please subscribe if you haven't already subscribed.
And there's the bell there, so click on the bell, and that will give you notifications for future videos once you've subscribed.
And if you have a topic that you'd like us to cover, or if you have questions about this topic, please leave a comment down below, and we will get back to you.
Yeah, thumbs up, thumbs down.
Hopefully they're both thumbs up.
Yeah, hopefully thumbs up. Whatever it is. We accept everything here. We accept criticism as well as other questions and praise and stuff like that. Remember that this is what we do, and it might not work for you. So thank you once again.
And let us know what does work for you. Maybe that'll help someone else that is struggling with something.
And tell your friends about Just a Different Life YouTube channel. We would love to see our subscriber count climb up there. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks. Good night.
Yep, good night.